Welcome everyone to our special board meeting. It's 6 o'clock, Tuesday, January 19, 2021. Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Craig.
Here.
Mr. Estheimer. Mr. Estheimer.
Present.
Mr. Freitas.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Lamo.
Here.
Dr. Pomponio.
Here.
Mr. Sage.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. And if you could please, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance here. I pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Southgate's mission statement, learning for life. Vision statement, Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Item D, revisions, approval of tonight's agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Support.
Was that Mr. Craig? Who was that? Oh, Mr. Sage. Thank you. All right. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none, would you please roll call vote that?
Mr. Estheimer.
Yes.
Mr. Freitas.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Lamos.
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio.
Yes.
Mr. Sage.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Thank you. We have an agenda and brings us to item E, citizens comment. All right.
Yes, we do. We have one citizen comment for this evening. This is from Rob and Tara Secco. Their address is 13805 Westminster. And the comment is, hello, members of the Board of the Southgate School Board. We wanted to start off by thanking Mrs. Irvine for hosting the 2 parent question and answer sessions last week. Both were very informative and we appreciate your transparency. One thing that stood out to us was that there are still many unknowns. There's still many parents who are struggling to make the choice. When the COVID situation is ever changing, hence why our board must meet monthly. Our mode of instruction parent commitments are ever changing as well. What we feel comfortable with right now might be totally different next trimester. While we are thrilled that the district is offering this, we would like for Southgate school board members to please consider giving elementary parents the opportunity to make another mode of instruction commitment for 3rd trimester. Thank you for your time. Thank you for responding to all of our emails. And thank you for hearing us out. Sincerely, Rob and Tara Secco, 2 very proud Ford Line Titan parents of 2 pretty amazing Ford Line Titans.
Great. Thank you so much. And that brings us to item F, our action agenda for tonight. And
Yes.
Mr. Green, will you be presenting?
I'll start. I think Ms. Irvine will.
Okay.
So this, and I just want to let the viewing public know and to the board that I am the one who wanted to call a special board meeting. I asked Mr. Estheimer, I talked to the board members. And the reason for that is at the end of the meeting last Tuesday, after reviewing it, I think there was uncertainty and there were some things that, at least for me, I know that I made mistakes. So I apologize. I'm human, and I was looking at everything from Friday, from the governor's announcement to our mode of instruction, and I conflicted some of the verbiage, which I think just followed through. So there's 2 things that happened on Tuesday. One, through no fault of Dr. Pomponio, I think it was something that was fast. If we were going to use a more community metric, River Rouge was thrown out there, and I approved it. And as I look back, I thought maybe there were more school of choice children than I thought. There was not. And so I think to tie up this metric, if we're using the average daily cases, which means the communities that touch Southgate, that will encompass 76% of our school of choice students, It's not everyone, and I know, we can't do everyone, or we could, then, where do you stop? If we use all the counties, you could go Macomb, Wayne, Oakland, but we chose, or at least the board voted, to use the community metric. So with that being said, we were remiss because we did not add Brownstown or Woodhaven, which is a community that touches us, but we did add River Rouge, which is a community that does not border our city. So I think the proposal would be, and well, I can't share my screen unless you let me, Tim, or whomever, but Southgate, to add Woodhaven and Brownstown to the current metric, and to remove River Rouge would be the first point. And then I know there's a second action item that will come later. The other point that I would like to make is there is a difference between what is considered a positivity rate and a 14-day average. An average rate isn't a positivity rate. That's like comparing apples and oranges. And again, myself blurred those together, which I know confused a lot of people and myself. So to rectify this verbiage, and in my opinion, to get it right, to understand that the metric we're using is the 14-day average of our surrounding communities in the city of Southgate. A percentage rate is totally different. That if we were going to use the percentage rate, we can't do that by city. That was told to me by Mr. Ezekiel from the Wayne County Health Department, or the Wayne County RISA. If we went that route, which was a possibility, the last 6 days we're at 9% or under anyway, so we're almost in the same spot. But I believe we need to clean this up and have the cities that surround Southgate as our metric for the 14-day average, and remove River Rouge and add Woodhaven and Brownstown.
You have anything to add to that, Mr. Irvine?
No, I completely agree with Vice President Green that our language, we are interchanging positivity rate and daily 14-day daily average of new cases. And so we do need to clarify that so that we can prevent any confusion on our website as we reflect and talk about positivity rates. We did adjust the district tracking of the target rate by using daily cases and taking out percentage, but we would like to clean that up. And I think we did have a motion prior that accepted the presentation, and the presentation itself said positivity rate. So the confusion of the board is absolutely understood. And it was ours as well that we weren't referring to a positivity rate. So I think that it would be very appropriate to go ahead and change that. The motion as it's given to you would be to approve the Southgate Community School Metric Amendment to consider the 14-day daily average of new cases for the communities of Southgate, Allen Park, Taylor, Wyandotte, Lincoln Park, Riverview, Brownstown, and Woodhaven. And so that would be the first motion that we would ask you to consider making at this time. And I think that will clean a lot of things up.
Questions for either Mr. Green or Mr. Irvine?
I have a question. This is kind of, I think, I'm sorry, Sean, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rick.
It's probably more of a procedural one than a policy one. So there's two motions that we've been talking about, entertaining and approving tonight. One is just as stated by Mr. Green and Ms. Irvine, and the other is almost identical, except the population that we would be using as a measurement would be those communities that's from which our school of choice kids come from. So my question is, from a procedural standpoint, if we take if someone makes the first motion and we approve it as the second motion not to be discussed at all and we're done, I just want to make sure, I'd like to make sure we all know that beforehand.
No, if you go ahead and pass the first motion, all we're doing is saying we're going to change the language and we're going to consider the communities of Southgate, Allen Park, Taylor, Wyandotte, Lincoln Park, Riverview, Brownstown, Woodhaven. The next motion, we can decide whether we'll take a weighted percentage of those enrollments rather than just averaging them all together. So there is some confusion there. When we drafted the motions, those would have been possibly they should have been two separate action items. But as I worked with President or Vice President Green, I understood his proposal to be the first to just limit it to the surrounding areas. And then after that's done and we've approved that, to consider whether or not the representation of those areas would be equal as an equal average, or whether or not we would weight those within that even further. Does that reflect your understanding, Vice President Green?
That's correct. If motion 2 is going to make a recommendation whether we want to make all of those communities even in the daily average or weight the percentage of those communities, it isn't, Rick, all of our school of choice. It encompasses 76% of our school of choice. Because if we did one here, one there, one there, one there, we might as well went back to counties, because we have one from Erie Mason, we have one from Livonia. So we were limited it to the majority of our students and where they come from.
Got it. Crystal clear. Thank you both. Back to you,
Mr. Sage, you're first. Mr. Craig, you're on deck.
Yeah, I just want to commend Mr. Green for bringing this to the board in regards to this. You know, it's a question of transparency for the community, right? So it gets out in front of everything. Though, you know, the decision was made, it doesn't change what the decision was. The percentages were still going into school, but it's transparent. It's transparent to the community, transparent to everybody out there. And, you know, it's the right move in my eyes. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sage. Mr. Craig.
So I feel like I'm right back where I was on Tuesday. Just going through the math, what we got on the weighted average, we seem to be missing like 175 kids. That's not 1 and 2. That seems to be a lot, right? Am I wrong?
Well, are we on motion 1 or 2? I mean,
I'm going off the email I got that I got earlier today saying weighted average. It had a total number of students and the communities that were in that. When you take the total and you deduct all the ones from those, we're missing 175. Where are those kids at? That's not 2 from Erie Mason. There's 175 somewhere.
Right. Well, Ms. Irvine can answer better than me, but I looked at the numbers too with her. Yes, there's 40 from Detroit. There's 2 from Erie Mason. There's 20 from here. But where do you want it to end? Do you want to include 17 different districts that have 1 or 2 kids? I mean, we're encompassing 70.
Not 1 or 2.
We're encompassing 76% of our students in this model, in my opinion. 76%.
So my question is, 40 is not 1 or 2. Do we have any communities we're counting that are less than 40? We have Allen Park at 31, Riverview at 31, Woodhaven, Brownstown at 41. Yet Detroit at 40 doesn't count. That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to saying that I think we should be a Wayne County average. We're a Wayne County community. The majority of families, the majority of kids live, work, and play in Wayne County. I know not exclusively. I know not there are other rules to that, but to me, we should be using the county and not trying to just cherry pick communities that make sense. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Craig. Mr. Green.
So I have to respectfully disagree with the term cherry picking counties. We're using the surrounding communities of Southgate that encompasses 76% of the students in an average. If we use the Wayne County metric, they don't use Detroit either. Wayne County excludes Detroit in their positivity rate, if that's what you want to do. So we're not doing anything different, except we're using a different model. And if we want to go back to that, I guess that's another discussion. But when Wayne County has their positivity rate, they don't use Detroit either. Detroit's using a different metric. To answer the other point of Mr. Craig, we're encompassing the number 1 district for school of choice in this model, which is Lincoln Park. Number 2 is Taylor. Woodhaven, Brownstown, and Detroit are neck and neck. Granted, there's the outlier. But Allen Park is next, and Riverview. 5 of the 6 communities that surround us have a majority of our students. That's the idea behind it. Now, if we want to go back to the Wayne County metric, which incidentally has been under 9% for 6 straight days also. which wouldn't really change it much. It just would be a matter of what would happen with the high school. It's a discussion that's up to this board that I don't have a total problem with. Personally, I care more about a majority of the people in the community than what's going on in Canton, which is considered Wayne County. In fact, I also have I have a chart just in case it was asked. If you wanted to use the downriver communities, what's considered the 17 downriver communities, excluding Detroit, but the 17 downriver communities. So it's not all of Wayne County, but the 17 downriver communities. And if I could share my screen, I could show you the average daily 14-day count would be 5.1 something from today's numbers from the Wayne County Health Department. So I think it's just a matter of a determination if you'd rather use the average. My personal issue with positivity rate is determined by how many people get tested. And I know none of these numbers are perfect, but I personally like this model better, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, if there's no one else waiting to speak, I'd like to ask a question. Dr. Pomponio, were you waiting?
No, go ahead, Rick.
Okay. So I think that to take a step back and address the question as to why we're having this discussion. And I think that we're probably all in this. This is a great discussion, by the way. I'm glad we're having this because I had the same reluctance after the meeting last week. So this is a healthy discussion, and it's the way we should do this. One, I think that we're all on the same page. What we're trying to do in a mixed up, unreliable, and uncertain metric environment to build out the most reflective risk level to our kids and teachers as we can. And the way I see this working out is if we look at all the school of choice communities from which we get kids, whether it's 1 or 50 or 200, whatever the number is, those are the folks that are going to be interacting in our schools and in our buildings and on our premise and campus. So maybe if we're trying to measure the risk brought in by by all students, including Southgate, then we should look at all the school of choice communities, and that may vary over time, right? And but that would be a simple metric, and it would at least focus our attention to new cases in the communities from which we are drawing our students. So I hope that was simple enough, but I think our intention is the same, and that is to, as simple as possible, measure the risk coming into our district. And maybe the best way to do that is to measure all school of choice communities and that we have kids coming in from. That's why I think that may make sense. I'm amenable to a different approach, but and there may be holes in what I'm saying, so feel free to pick it apart.
Mr. President,
Dr. Pomponio.
that was my thinking because we didn't have a lot of information when we made the motion. We were doing basically a work session right there. I didn't know the figures. I was going by the school of choice, and I figured the students that were entering into our district was the students we should be counting. So that's the theory that I went by. So, I mean, whatever the will of the board is, but I think that we should look at the students that are coming into our buildings as the percentage to weigh, or the percentage.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right.
I do. I'm sorry, I do then. So
Yeah.
I think I hear what Rick and Dr. P and Jason are saying. Is this another table discussion? I mean, you can have, I hate to say this, but you can have as many emergency meetings as you need. I don't think we have that number. That wasn't the proposal for motion 1 or 2. The proposal was to just add the surrounding communities, which encompassed a majority of our school of choice. I don't think we're ready. If we're doing that, then both of these motions, I will assume, will fail. And then we're still legally have a motion to have River Rouge in the rubric, and school starts Monday. I don't know exactly where we're going to go from here.
I'm comfortable with going with what's presented tonight because of the low numbers in River Rouge, but it's just too confusing for me because initially I said no metrics, so I'm gonna, discuss what I feel that I understand at this point. But I think we should go on course with what we have here, because when I had that discussion, I actually, because we were in the heat of it, I actually forgot about Woodhaven and Brownstown. So I'm happy with that because I know that there's a lot of students from Woodhaven and Brownstown. So I'm willing to go with the motion one on the table tonight.
Mr. President.
Mr. Sage first, then Mr. Craig.
Yeah, the way we took this meeting going on was basically just for transparency for the community, for the board, so we're all on the same page with everything. I understand where Mr. Craig's coming from, but I also understand the motion that's in front of us is a large percentage of the students. So if you look on a map and you look at Southgate and the surrounding cities around Southgate, the ones that touch, I think the only one that may not touch is Woodhaven, which is right there. I do understand Jason's point, but for me, we're downriver community, as I said in the last meeting. I respect everybody on the board. I think we need to move forward. I don't want the public to misinterpret this as we're trying to change the path, because regardless, we're under the number, right? Regardless, it doesn't change anything. It's more of transparency for the community around us. We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can, so there's not the questions on Facebook, and all the concerns that are out there. So, as I said the first time, I commend Andy Green for bringing this up. I'm supportive of this, and I'm supportive of this because it is the community surrounding Southgate. And I understand what the concern is about it, but if we're taking downriver, that's the communities we're talking about, and I'm for supporting this.
Thank you, Mr. Sage. Mr. Craig.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm hearing from everybody is they like the idea of bringing in and discussing and using the metric of the communities that are brought into our schools through school of choice. The problem is we don't have that information. We don't know what that is, if that's what we're doing, because we don't have those numbers. We haven't been given those numbers. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't been given those numbers. The only numbers we have are either the Wayne County numbers or the selected communities that have been picked. And if we do want to bring in different numbers without that information, we can guess that the numbers wouldn't change, and we can guess that everything would still be on track, but I don't know that it would be. Again, not having that information in front of me. So I don't know. I guess I would offer a motion that we pause any opening until we can get all the numbers together and come up with what we think is the right metric. Because it's all about taking this out of our making arbitrary decisions and making fact-based decisions. I don't know how we can do that without facts. So I would make a motion that we pause any school opening until we can get that information and make an educated decision.
All right. Well, Mr. Craig had put a motion on the table. So is there a second to his motion? With lack of support, motion fails, which brings us back to Mr. Green.
So, here's my thinking on this. If we're thinking forward, if we're going to try to encompass every single school, I do believe we do have those numbers from the school district. Ms. Irvine does have those numbers. I haven't seen them all. I've seen most of them, and that's where Erie Mason stuck out to me. That's why I keep bringing that up, that I know we have one student from Erie Mason, and I know we have a couple from Livonia. So if we have some from Oakland County, Macomb County, and this and that, we're picking these communities and then those counties, then I think I would circumvent and say, if we go back to a county percentage, then you have to use all of those counties, because if that's what we're saying about bringing in every single student, if we're going to try to get that perfect with the rubric, then if you go back to the counties, then you might as well use the percentage of all the counties. And if you use today's percentage of all the counties, we're still under 9, which was the irregular. So I think there's where do we want to head with this? I hear what everybody's saying. I agree with Mr. with Rick, and this is, I think, why we had to have this, had this discussion.
If you are looking for additional information, I can share a screen with you that will show you within Wayne County what all of those districts represented are in those numbers. That's available here. That was initially what motion 2 was considering, was actually looking at it weighted for all the students enrolling. The problem with the data is that we pulled that data from Wayne Risa, who's only tracking it for Wayne County. So where we see school of choice from places like Macomb or any other county, we don't have, that's not, Wayne Risa is not tracking that by municipality. So the only information we have would be for Wayne County. We can pull that up.
So we do have Detroit, River Rouge, Ecorse, where we get So why don't we take a look at it then? If we want to add as many school of choice, and that would add Detroit, right, everyone, which is the 4th largest. Now we would have probably at least 80% of our school of choice, and with the data that we have, and the top 6 school of choices in the district.
Okay, so this is our school of choice at this point in time. So we have from Airport, we have 6 students from Airport. We have 31 students from Allen Park, 2 from Dearborn, 13 from Dearborn Heights, 43 from Detroit, 27 from Ecorse, 4 from Flat Rock, 2 from Gibraltar, 4 from Grosse Ile, 4 from Huron, 1 from Jefferson, 290 from Lincoln Park, 1 from Mason, 13 from Melvindale, 3 from Monroe, 25 from River Rouge, 31 from Riverview, 12 from Romulus, 110 from Taylor. We have 12 from Trenton, 1 from Wayne Westland, 2 from Westwood, 41 from Woodhaven Brownstown, 53 from Wyandotte, and 2,720 from Southgate. Now, these are 1920 numbers pulled from the data from Michigan school data. Now, this was initially, if you were choosing motion 2 at wholesale, as far as amending the metric so that it's a 14 daily average of new cases for all communities with students enrolling in Southgate Community Schools weighted for percentage of enrollment. By the time you reduce the number of places, decimal points in this, your numbers from Airport, your numbers from Airport, from Dearborn Heights, from Flat Rock, Gibraltar, Grosse Ile, all the ones that are in dark become, they're removed because their percentage equivalency exceeds the 2 decimal point. So if we were looking at it that way, as which ones would be removed in terms of how closely they would provide us with information. If you look then at Allen Park, 1% of that rubric would be the current average daily rate by community from Allen Park. We would have 1.25% for Detroit, 0.78 for Ecorse, 8.4 from Lincoln Park, 0.72 from River Rouge, 0.90 from Riverview, 3.19 from Taylor, 1.19 from Woodhaven Brownstown, 1.54, and then 78%, 0.82, that's our Southgate percentage. So if you were to construct a infection rate based on those averages, you end up with an average of 8.81 in the 14 daily rate case. Now this version and this model was from the rates as they were expressed last. They were not updated over the weekend, because over the weekend, a new version of this, as Vice President Green talked a little bit more about whether or not we limit the weighting for percentage of enrollment only to those contiguous districts. So let me share that with you now. If we went that way, this is what that looks like, and you did receive this today. If we said that, if we adjusted motion 1 to say that you would approve the Southgate Community School Metric Amendment to consider the 14-day daily average of new cases for the communities of Southgate, Allen Park, Taylor, Wyandotte, Lincoln Park, Riverview, Brownstown, and Woodhaven. Now this is what it would look like if we decided we're going to go ahead and be representative, but we're only going to be representing the districts that are immediately contiguous. Now we have that 1% from Allen Park, Lincoln Park there, Riverview, Taylor, Woodhaven, Brownstown, Wyandotte, Southgate. And these are the updated numbers from that were put in today. So if you were to consider those,
Sorry,
now,
I can't see those. I can't see those.
You have to share, you have to, the other screen you need
Yeah,
up.
you're not displaying that.
oh, thank you.
Yep.
Very much.
Yep.
I assumed that since I was adjusting my screen, that it was adjusting with it. Thank you for stopping me. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see if this does it. Yeah, there we go. You seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now this is where we have the limited contiguous counties around us. And these are updated numbers. So if you were to say, and Jason or Trustee Craig is right, this doesn't account for all, because when you do the math on the number of students, all the students in there does not make 30,451. In fact, it's all the others that were in the previous slide that composed that. But if we're pulling out just the contiguous counties and constructing a rubric from that, then the average would be 7.49. And of course, that average is missing the components of those that are not represented there. So, you know, that's the downside of it. Now, an alternative, which was also what Vice President Green suggested, is rather than itemizing each one of these, do we just say, you know, it's either the contiguous districts around as one block infection rate that's averaged those infection rates. And then you basically have a Southgate average, which is 5.91, based on the 78% of the representation. And then a constructed one, which would be using a 7.83, which is averaging all of those rates, and then weighting it. And then your newly constructed one would be 7.57. So those are definitely two options that can be considered if we feel that weighting is important. Otherwise,
Ms. Irvine, if we added Detroit, which was Mr. Craig's, why aren't we adding Detroit? If we had Detroit and then Ecorse and River Rouge, which would be the top 7 in your other slide, we're a little higher because Detroit has the number, of course, that's higher being a bigger city. The average, though, if I saw it right, was still under 9. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay.
And I would say, I would caution, one of the problems with using 14-day daily average is that it doesn't account for the size of the population. So when you pull out Detroit's, and Detroit has 85 new cases, well, their cases per million are still lower than the rate that might be seen in Southgate because of the size of their population. So you're looking at raw numbers of cases, and Detroit will skew that number. And same as River Rouge is skewing that number because of its low population too. So when you're considering communities of comparable size, which now you're getting into Allen Park, Lincoln Park, Riverview, Taylor, those may be closer in size, in which the infection or the average daily rate is going to mean something more similar than Detroit getting pulled in, or River Rouge just on volume of cases. So that's another way to look at that.
So the way I look at it is that if Detroit wants to be added to the rubric, and River Rouge and Ecorse, which probably not, I think you have the numbers there, would encompass well over 80% of our school of choice students where we're coming from. We can't do the 14-day average, as you said, from places like Erie, Mason, or Macomb County, because they don't do that. Then we would have to add Detroit, River Rouge, and Ecorse to motion 1 if we want to put them in motion 2. I think that's where we're at, if we want to consider both of these motions still.
Right, or you can adjust the motion 1 to just say at the end, add weighted for the percentage of their enrollment, and just add that to the language of motion 1, which just then limits those contiguous counties or contiguous municipalities, and then simply weight for percentage within those enrollments.
You're right, but what I'm saying is, if in in metric 2,
Right.
if the board's will is to add the majority and more of the majority of the school of choice, which is Detroit, because Detroit and Woodhaven are similar. I think Detroit has 4 more. And then I think if you add Detroit, you add River Rouge and Ecorse. So now you're encompassing probably really 80% or more. Then if we're adding them into the metric, then we have to go back to motion 1 and add them into the communities we're considering. That's my point.
Right.
So we would have to amend both motions. So that's, I think, what's up for discussion.
Mhm.
Mr. Lamas.
You, Dr. Pomponio, I didn't want to step on you. Were you
No,
gonna-
that's okay. I'll wait for you to go first.
Okay, so just again, going back to the purpose here, I think what we're all trying to do is do our best to assess the risk to Southgate students and staff and the community as a whole by the decision that we're going to make here. And one of the premises is that we're trying to use the communities that contribute kids or that send kids to our school district and participate in our district. And for some of those districts or communities, we can't get numbers that we want to use. So I see you nodding, Dr. Irvine. So if that were the case, Wayne County wouldn't give us those other communities either, would they?
They're not tracking that unless they're in Wayne County.
So one of the questions is, are we best served by going back to what Mr. Craig had said, and it's just using the Wayne County number as a whole, because we're not getting in both cases, using a narrow population and using the broad Wayne County ones, we're still not getting some of the school of choice communities counted into that. So that if we make either one of those choices like that, we're not counting some of the students that could contribute to disease in Southgate. So there's some downside each of those. The other way to look at it is if we keep motion 1, add the communities we've just discussed, Detroit, those extra 3 communities, we've at least accounted for 80% or so of the incoming kids, and then we use a weighted average, and then we would have to add the weighted average to that if we so desire. Is that correct, Dr. Irvine?
Well, I would say that we are closer to 90% of our community represented when it comes to just the communities that are named, because 78.82 is just Southgate.
Okay.
8.4, additional 8.4 is just Lincoln Park. So you're actually closer to representing 90% with this just these communities around than you are. It's not 70%, not 76. Total represented is close to 90% at this point.
So if we were to add, I'll stop after this. So if we were to add the 3 communities we just discussed to motion 1, then what you say would be true. So the difference between motion 1 and motion 2 is that we're accounting only. What is the difference between 2? Why would we add 2 then? I think the intent was to capture school of choice communities, right?
Right. So the second motion was the idea that we would take all the communities in Wayne County and that we have information on, and weight all of them. Which if we choose to do that, you don't have to do motion 1 at all. You've got motion 2 taken care of, because it will capture Detroit and Ecorse and any of those that we can capture that have large enough numbers for us to capture.
Okay.
And that was the first slide. And
Okay. All right. So I have one last question. So, Mr. Vice President, I've never called you that before, Mr. Green. So you must have a theory or a hypothesis behind limiting the communities that you've already listed in motion 1. What is the premise behind that? I want to understand why you thought that would work.
And again, I don't think there's a clear-cut, easy answer. I'm open to, if we add Detroit and River Rouge and Ecorse, then we probably have close to 95% of our school of choice. I would think, and if that's the way we want to go, I'm okay with that. I think Detroit skews the numbers a lot. I think if we do that, then a discussion for next week is going to go back to something I said last week. I think you're going to be hard pressed to get an average daily count of 5 before the high school returns, which I think it would be a different discussion at our meeting next week. The high school isn't going back on Monday anyway. But my original thought was that a majority of the students and the people in the community are going to be in this general area. No disrespect to River Rouge. My sister lives in River Rouge or Detroit. I would be more apt to think that Southgate students, Lincoln Park and Taylor students, which is a majority of our students, are going to be more apt to being in the surrounding community and their families than going to Detroit and River Rouge on a daily basis. I understand people work in Detroit. I understand people work in Wayne County. I myself work in Oakland County. Nothing's perfect. But that was my idea with the surrounding communities and the average daily cases in these areas. I just think on an average, a majority of the people are going to be around these communities more percentage-wise than heading to River Rouge, Detroit, Canton, Westland. Now, hey, I'm all for if we're going to keep it consistent, and that's what Mr. Sage was mentioning. If we want to add Detroit, River Rouge, and E-Course to encompass the majority of our school of choice students, nothing, as you said, Rick, is going to be perfect, then I am absolutely okay with that.
And,
I'm okay with that.
The only caveat to that we should think about, and I'm not trying to make this more complex than it already is, but if the communities from which we get school of choice kids change, then the language in motion 1 is very restrictive. So we should no matter whether it's motion 1 or 2 or 50 or whatever, that doesn't matter, but we need to be flexible enough in our motion so that it is specific enough to say it's school of choice kids who are coming into our district. But keep it open, because as that changes, and it may change in a month and a year, we don't know. That way, we've already got that we're playing by the same rules. Does that make any sense? If my fear is unwarranted, say so.
I think that's pretty much what motion 2
Right.
language is. That encompasses the students enrolling in Southgate Community Schools.
Right. I agree too. I don't want to stifle any other conversation. I would like to make a motion, but I won't. I'm sure others have something to say. Mr. Freitas, maybe you have been trying to say something. No.
Mr. President, I do have a question.
Dr. Pomponi.
Do we know of any other districts that are using the percentages of their own school for Southgate, for example, just using Southgate or for their own district? Do we know of any?
So in our conversation with Wayne County superintendents at our last meeting, Steve Ezekian did ask if these numbers are helpful, and there were several that superintendents who said that they are using them. I do not know of any board who is using them as a metric like this. I think that they are more or less providing additional support where needed. If the rationale for returning or not returning is needed, this is support, but I don't know of any school district that's incorporated this into their metric in isolation.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just looking at, a way where we can get our high school students back where we're not, excluding them, month to month down the road.
Mr. Green.
So as we're hashing this out, Wayne County, let's Wayne County minus Detroit. I have a chart because I was ready for all these different questions maybe. Go back to what Mr. Gregg had proposed using the Wayne County numbers. The 13th, which was last Wednesday or Thursday, was 9%. The 14th was 8.9. This is coming from the COVID now, okay? The 15th was 8.9. The 16th was 8.6. The 17th was 8.2. Now, this is where, Ms. Irvine, you can help me, because when we originally said the 7-day positivity rate, they don't submit numbers on Sunday, but when you go to the COVID now, they take the average and backtrack the Sunday percentage and the Monday percentage. So if that's the case, we're at 7.8% or 8.2 yesterday and 7.8 that was released at 4:30 today. If we go back to the original metric of the Wayne County, if that's what we want to do, then we've met the 7 continuous days of 9 or below, which would still trigger the elementary and middle school going back. And if that's the way, as Mr. Craig has proposed, if it's simpler because we can't encompass everything as we're talking through this, as Rick pointed out and Ms. Irvine, we can't get the 14-day rolling average from every single school of choice. If we revert back to that, we're not changing anything about the elementary and middle school going back on Monday. It would just be the metric that we use moving forward from the high school. And we would still be in the same boat, but we would just be moving forward with the Wayne County metric for the high school. Is that accurate, Ms. Irvine?
It is, although I think if you don't, in that motion, declare a start for the elementary and middle school starting on Monday, the fact that we haven't yet met that metric may cause a little bit of confusion with families. Just, I mean, we believe that we will have made that. So maybe we're talking about moving forward at this point.
How did we not meet the metric if Sundays and Mondays, according to the Wayne County now, are the same numbers because they average them? To me, that says 9, 8.9, 8.9, 8.6, 8.2, 8.2, 7.8. Today was the 7th day.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not showing up on, I didn't see that on COVID Neck now. I see the last reported day to be, the 17th, and that the 18th and 19th haven't been posted yet, correct?
The 19th would count as the 18th with a holiday, from what I understand, and it was released at 4:30. It's 7.8 for today.
Okay. So then we would just, okay, well, yeah, then we would have made it. So then.
I mean,
absolutely.
let me
Yeah.
double check while I'm here.
I just want to make sure that we don't have any confusion about whether that's going to happen on Monday, because we have all of our systems moving forward and all of our families on board and moving.
Just give me 1 minute. I guess the big question, you would know better than I, the legalities. From my understanding, when they don't report on a holiday or Sundays, they take the average of the two. And I guess that would be for you, Ms. Irvine, to answer. Let me double check that the numbers that I saw were correct this morning or this afternoon.
So,
I believe-
through the chair, while Andy's doing that, I know that what we're not trying to do here is find a way to get to the number we want, so we have a reason to open, right? So,
no, it's what we want to use as the best metric, and if the best metric would change, it would change, but it may not in this situation, but it would still make a difference, Rick, on what we do moving forward with the elementary or with the middle school. Yeah, today, can I share my screen, Mr. or whoever?
Yeah, Michelle, do you know how to share, allow someone else to share a screen?
You should still be able to, Andy, I would think.
Okay,
Unless,
all right,
yeah,
let me look.
if you hit present now, you should still be able to.
Okay. Let me.
The struggles of teaching in 2020.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we got it. We got it.
Okay, so that's today. That was released at 4:30. So the positive test rate is 7.8. If you see underneath at the bottom, it says updated on January 19th. So 9, 8.9, 8.9, 8.6, 8.2. I guess the technicality is, since yesterday was a holiday, they in the past, from what I understood, the number stayed the same because they divided by 2. So the 7th day would either be today or tomorrow, right? And unless there's a major outbreak, I would seriously doubt it would be.
No, I absolutely believe that we've met it. We will have met it by the time that counting is done. I do. I just would hate to have there be even a moment of hesitation on whether or not that's happening. So, there's been a lot of discussion about, I wonder if it might be better to separate out the question of how do we approach high school, and what all of our discussion on considering the appropriate rate for high school return was based on a positivity rate and the information we knew about positivity rates. If you took a look at the Harvard study on how they interpret daily cases, the average daily cases, a 14-day average, what they say is that below 1 is considered low risk, 1 to 9 is considered medium risk, 10 to 25 is considered high risk, 25 and above is considered critical. So now you're really seeing absolutely no difference between in risk level, which is what you had mentioned, Vice President Green, in our last meeting, and when you had spoken with the epidemiologist about whether or not risk changes between 5 and 9%. But I wonder if that's a topic for more study, because it's really about the appropriate time to how to use a daily case rate to determine whether or not a risk level is there, and how we impact high school. And if that's separate from our question about elementary and middle school, maybe we're really confusing it by trying to put all those together. Just a thought.
I mean, what's everybody else think with those numbers? With Monday not being released, do you think Wayne County hits the metric of 7 days? Or Mr. President, I would ask you, do we have a feel if we want to use the Wayne County rate moving forward and not use the daily average rate, because they are definitely two different metrics. The other thing is, I know the community's always asking, why are we using rates other people aren't? Look, we're getting, and Jason, Mr. Craig has said this before, we're getting no help from the governor. I'll just be honest, because there isn't no rhyme or reason. Everybody has their choice, every district, to make, a different rubric, and every district isn't back, and every district hasn't stopped. Dearborn's not back. Allen Park's not back as of today. Melvindale's not back. So it's not like every district is back. I know we're trying to do what's the safest to get back, and I think we're there at either rubric, but I think it's which one do we, after listening to all this information, which one we think is better? Because I think the Wayne County rubric we've met. I don't think there's any 7 days. To me, I believe we met that rubric either way, whichever way we go. So it's not trying to skew the numbers to get there. For example, I brought this up to have this meeting early on Wednesday or Thursday last week. I'm not a fortune teller. I have no idea what these numbers were going to be the next 5 days. This is just how it played out, which is a good thing because it means things are getting better. So I think that's probably a discussion to hear what the rest of the board members think.
Mr. Sage.
If you can bear with me, I'll try to read this. I'm going to go off screen here and get to the motion here. If you can bear with me, please.
Okay.
Mr. Green, do you want to stop presenting?
All right. I move to approve the Southgate Community School Metric Amendment to consider the 14 daily average of new cases for the communities of Southgate, Allen Park, Taylor, Wyandotte, Lincoln Park, Riverview, Brownstown, and Woodhaven.
Thank you, Mr. Sage. It's a motion on the board by Mr. Sage. Is there a second for that motion? Motion fails due to lack of support. All right, we're back to the drawing board here.
So I think the question bodes, which direction do we want to head? Does everybody agree that we've had a lot here, and I think it's a lot better than last week, but what direction do we want to head? Does that mean we want to add Detroit, River Rouge, and E-Course and go to the weighted metric, or do we want to make the decision to revert back to the Wayne County? And again, in my opinion, we've met the Wayne County rubric already. So I don't think it's going to change elementary or middle school going back. We do have a right as a board, which is what this special meeting is. I think that people need to understand this isn't easy, but it's not like we have to revisit it every 30 days. We can revisit it like we are now. It means you have to revisit your mode of instruction by law within 30 days. It doesn't mean you can't do it beforehand. So that's what we're doing right now. We have every right to do this. We're not doing anything illegal under the law.
May I ask a question?
Mr. Sage.
But regardless of whatever rubric, whatever counties, or not counties, whatever cities we choose, we are still under the 9%. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
So regardless for the community, I know that their head is spinning right now trying to figure out, are we going to school the 25th or not? Regardless, this is for transparency for the community, but regardless, we're under that number. So regardless of the decision, the kids are back in school the 25th. Is that a fair statement for the community?
That is a fair statement unless you decide to go back to the Wayne County, and we'll know that for sure tomorrow. And we believe that's what it's going to be.
Okay, thank you.
So through the chair.
Yeah, Mr. Lamas.
I don't want to pretend, and I don't think anyone in this group are pretending to have all the answers and are 100% certain. And Mr. Green is correct. We've had zero help from the governor. I mean, zero. I won't even go down that road. So here we are in a situation where we've got several different kinds of metrics that can give us approximately the same result. So we would have as reliable a blueprint about the infections in cases that are going to be involved in our district. I think, and I think that if we use the metrics from all the communities that we can get access to for those school of choice communities, that may change over time, but if we use motion 2 as the engine to get there, that it may cover that. So I'm going to make that motion. If someone doesn't want to second it, I certainly understand, but I think we're real close with that. And the metrics appear to be as reliable based on the Harvard work you were talking about, Ms. Irvine. So I move to approve the Southgate Community School Metric Amendment to consider the 14-day daily average of new cases for all communities with students enrolling in Southgate Community Schools, weighted for the percentage of the enrollment.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. And do we have a second for that motion?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Green. All right, we have a motion and a second, and let's have some further discussion here.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, sir.
So in this metric, we're adding Detroit, River Rouge, and E-Course, as Ms. Irvine pointed out, understanding that we can't add every single school of choice community. So it's going to be approximately 90 to 95% adding Detroit, adding River Rouge, and E-Course, which now we're looking at the top, I would say 7, if I'm thinking right, school of choice communities. Is that correct, Ms. Irvin?
You're muted.
Once we weed out, and by weeding out, I mean remove those that are statistically not going to weigh in because of the percentages, we will be considering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There will be 10 total. It will be Allen Park, Detroit, E-Course, Lincoln Park, River Rouge, Riverview, Taylor, Woodhaven, Brownstown, Wyandotte, and Southgate. Those will be the communities that will feed that infection rate based on having a sample size or a case size that's large enough for us to count.
Follow up.
Okay, go ahead. And then Mr. Craig.
Just a quick follow-up. So with that being said, we would still be under the average daily count, not percentage now, so we understand what it's called. Average daily count, I believe, was 8.8. So that still triggers elementary and middle school from being in on Monday, but then probably a discussion to be had at next board meeting about, do we want to keep an average daily count of 5 at the high school? Would I would think would be a discussion for next Tuesday. Is that accurate?
I think that we then have to decide what is the risk level, and is there a difference between 5 and 9, and is it appropriate to differentiate under daily cases at that time?
Right. I agree.
Mr. Craig.
So just so I can understand this, because again, I think I'm pretty smart, but I think I'm still missing something here. Why are we excluding some of those communities? Is it based on the number of students participating? Or
Yeah, it's just a matter of rounding. Like, how far are we going to round when we look at what percentage they represent in the rubric? So if you're talking about,
can you go back and share that screen that shows those numbers again?
absolutely, just one moment. Okay, so here, hopefully you're able to see. So airport had 6. When you consider the count of that, it's less than when 2 decimals removed from it. So we're in the 0.0007 range. So it was a rounding decision on whether we counted more than 2 decimal places. If the board would feel more comfortable, if we went, I mean, the rubric, the motion wouldn't change. If we're more comfortable with including 3 decimal places in there, we may capture Dearborn Heights at that point and Melvin Dull if we did that.
It really just comes down to the number of students that you're excluding from that list.
Yes. Yeah, those districts represent or include.
But that's not what the motion was for, right?
Right. So it would say enrolling weighted for percentage of enrollment. So it would depend on the formula of what that weighting looked like. So it would consider it. It has it in there and considered. The amount was negligible if it's 2 decimal points. So it does have to do with the formula for weighting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Through the chair.
Mr. Lamas.
So to Mr. Craig, through the chair, is there an issue with the statistical part of this that I'm missing that yet you see? I mean, you're a better numbers guy than I. Is there something there that looks like it could be misconstrued, or that we'd miss something, or ignore something, or overstate?
We don't have to, apply rounding. I mean, at some point, rounding is always going to be applied, whether it's by Excel themselves or by us. And so when we do that calculation, we're not comfortable with rounding and want to make sure that even the smallest number of students is represented, we can make sure that that's accounted for in the.
Thank you. And I was asking Mr. Craig the same, if that's okay.
No, I don't see anything that does it. I wasn't sure that we were basing it on something to do with that they were. What I wanted to make sure of was that they were excluded based on the student number essentially, and not the result of the weighted average. That's what I wanted to see.
All right.
Which that's what it appears is that based on. I mean, I'm guessing. Just kind of quick glancing at the numbers, and I can't see all of it, but it looks like anything 13 and under are dropping out. So I don't know how far it goes past Westwood, but it looks like anything under 13, we're dropping those kids out, which again, I don't necessarily have a problem with. I think anything that gives us a broader perspective is better than the narrow, than the narrow beam. So, yeah, I mean, again, I can muddy this up as much as we want with discussions about what this actually represents, because it's last year's numbers. It doesn't represent kids coming into the school. But again, we can beat this horse all we want. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep. Any further discussion before we call the question? Mr. Craig, I'm just kidding. You're just stretching. Any further questions or comments or discussion? All right. Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the question?
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Motion carries. Any closing remarks on that, Mr. Irvine, as far as clarity is concerned? Do you have anything you wanted to add to that, Ms. Irvine, as far as clarity is concerned, that we may have muddied up at all, or is it clear to you?
Well, it's clear, and I'll assume, I mean, it's clear as a really imperfect attempt to capture risk can be using last year's numbers and the challenges of statistics themselves. So I do believe that it's enough guidance for our district to move forward and to clarify documents on our website so that our public understands that we are factoring in the communities within Wayne County that feed into our school district, some of whom may not have a representative total that will actually contribute to the infection rate, but we will definitely go through the process of considering them.
Okay, and then you'll get those numbers to us, those actual numbers to us tomorrow.
Yes.
Or tonight, whatever. All right, Mr. Green first, then Dr. Paponio next.
So could we, or is it going to be on a website, Ms. Irvine, when we add River Rouge, Detroit, and E-Course? Again, that's the majority of our school of choice. The percentage of school of choice, or could you send that to the board so we can see that? Because I'm curious, as you said, that it sounds like that's going to encompass well over 90% of the entire student population. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. Well over probably 97%, 98%.
Dr. Paponio, do you have anything last minute to add before we close?
Yes. Did we need to add a start date to that motion or no?
So we're well, I'll let the president speak to that.
No, go ahead, please.
We're amending the rubric that was done at that time, so it's going to have retroactive effect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone, and thank you to Mr. Sage, who's actually coaching as we speak here somehow, multitasking. And we'll accept the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Green. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please roll call vote us out.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Siege,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas.
Yes.
Thank you. We're adjourned, everyone. I appreciate you taking the